Week 16 waiver wire ads. We're talking about the waiver wire in week 16, which means you won. You're in your league final four. For some of you, it's cumulative points. For some of you, this is one and done. I'm in mixed leagues. Some of them are head-to-head matchups. Some of them are going to be a 2-week sprint. And then, of course, there's a couple of leagues that I'm in where I'm done with waivers, not allowed to add anybody. So this is for specific players. But if you're watching this video in week 16 in deep December, then you're doing well this year. You're in a position to make some money. You're in a position to win a league championship. And for some of you, winning the league championship means a lot more than winning the money. For some of you, winning the money means more than the league championship. Depends on your league. Depends on just that, how long you've been in it. Depends on who you're competing against. Competing against strangers, it's probably the money. If you're competing against your friends, then it might be the championship, but the money's cool too. So let's go get that money. Let's go get that championship. And let's play some offense and add some players that can help us. But let's also play some defense. You only have to look at 3 other teams right now. Take a look at your opponents. See what they need and prevent them from getting what they need. If they need to get a quarterback, then prioritize quarterback. If they need a running back, prioritize running backs. If they need a wide receiver, prioritize wide receiver. This is 2 weeks. Depth matters less than it did weeks ago because you only need your guys to stay healthy for 2 weeks. So if it means potentially getting rid of a guy in order to add somebody who the person you're playing really needs, then that's a matter of that's a financial decision for you. Be aggressive playing defense, especially if you have more fab than your opponents. You also can kind of get ahead with the news. Some of your league mates might not be as sharp as you are. They might not be consuming content like you are. They might not be paying attention to injury reports. And you're always going to get some leagues where you get somebody who gets to this point and they're happy because they're not used to being here. They're not used to being in Final Four. They're not used to competing for fantasy championships. You know that guy. You know that girl who are super excited to be playing in a Final Four. That's the one you want to get rid of. So look at these people's rosters. Make sure that you know what they need. You don't have to know your whole league. Some people are going to say Theo, I don't want to spend time looking at other people's rosters. I'm all about myself, getting my team better. I agree on that. But when we get to this point in the year where there's very few teams, go and play some defense. So take a look at that. This waiver wire show is always about the deep league options. I'm going to talk about players who are available to you in 70% of leagues or more. These are the players that are available to me in my leagues. And I think that these are the players that are going to help you the most because a lot of shows out there this time of year, they're going to go tell you to go grab Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford's available to me in 0 of my leagues. There's other waiver wire shows that are going to tell you to go add Tajae Spears. If Tajae Spears is available in your league, go grab him. That's awesome. But he's not available to me in any of my leagues. These are players that are being referenced that are Jerome Ford's available in maybe 50% of leagues. Tajae Spears available in 40% of leagues. Those guys don't help me. If they help you, go get them. Those are better options than a lot of the guys I'm going to talk about, and they're sort of plug-and-play players. We have one running back who could be a plug-and-play player who could be really impactful over the next 2 weeks. Let's talk about a couple of our shallow league ads first, though. Let's talk about some players that are maybe available in fewer leagues than I'm going to reference, but should still be added. Romeo Doubs, available to you in 62% of leagues. Romeo Doubs scored 2 touchdowns. Green Bay cruised in Seattle. Impressive win for Green Bay. Green Bay nearly beat Detroit on a Thursday night. Turn around, they win in Seattle. So Doubs scores 2 touchdowns. He also drew a long pass interference penalty. Josh Jacobs is running well. That's the power behind Green Bay's success. But look for Romeo Doubs to be a factor against New Orleans and Minnesota if those games shoot over. And they definitely could. Green Bay might hang a number on New Orleans, and the Minnesota game could be a little bit more of an over environment than some people think. Tyler Allgeier, available to you in 67% of leagues. If Bijan Robinson misses a game, Allgeier would be a top 15 play at the running back position. Jameis Winston. Okay, this is a funny one because I'm going to talk about Jameis, and I'm also going to talk about DTR a little bit later. Jameis Winston is available to you in 67% of leagues. He was just terrible against Kansas City. He had 3 interceptions. Kevin Stefanski has not named his starter for this week against Cincinnati. If Jameis is starting against Cincinnati, he's in play for you in Superflex 100%. That game could pop off. All the Cincinnati games pop off. But there's a chance that he gets benched. So keep an eye on this one. Another player who was not even in my article, was sort of an afterthought, Alexander Mattison. And you could read my article version of this podcast at playerprofiler.com. Every single week, it's free. Alexander Mattison is now in play this week against Jacksonville because our guy, Sincere McCormick, is now dealing with an injury that knocked him out of Monday Night Football's game. So Mattison will most likely split time with Amir Abdullah. Amir Abdullah was really good catching the ball last night, but Alexander Mattison will get probably the first crack against the Jacksonville defense this week if McCormick is not ready to go. And that's a game where Mattison could have some success against Jacksonville on the ground. I wouldn't want to start him, but I don't know your situation, and he will get some touches this week. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs that can help you this week. A little shorter show, less players to talk about because less of you competing this week in a very, very fun and what could be very profitable Week 16 for us. We'll be right back.
Hey, I know it's a popular statistic to cite, these underdog pick'ems, the vast majority of people go more than on any given player. Yeah, close to 80% of people, but that's because it's easier to find the shootouts than it is to find the dud games every Sunday afternoon. Like we knew Week 5, Ravens-Bengals was going to be a shootout. And there goes Lamar Jackson for 4 touchdowns. There goes Joe Burrow for 5 touchdowns. Derrick Henry gets there. Zay Flowers is over 100 yards. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both got there, as well as Chase Brown. Both Chases got there. You go more than, you 100x your payout on Underdog with their Pick 6 contest. But then you look at Dolphins Patriots, that's going down the toilet, right? Too bad Ramondre Stevenson at 18 fantasy points. But you improve your chances at positive returns when you correlate with these Underdog pick'ems. Use promo code Underworld. This is the biggest bonus Underdog has ever given out, up to $125. Promo code is Underworld. Put in $250, you get $125. Now go start picking.
Welcome back to Waiver Wired. I'm Theo Gremminger, bringing you all of your Waiver Wire ads for Week 16 and some players for you to stash in Week 17 as well. Let's start off at the quarterback position. It's become a funny, running joke. I see the comments in YouTube. People kind of always say you're a Drake Maye guy. You always talk about him. You overhype him. But let's get real about Drake Maye. Drake Maye this past week, heading into Monday Night Football, was the quarterback 11 on the week. So this is a player that gave you another Sunday of low-end QB1 production, slash high-end QB2 production. So he was QB10 in week 13, QB10 in week 13, yep. And then has his bye week, comes back out, and he's QB11. He's not perfect. New England has a lot of flaws, but Drake Maye gave you a rushing touchdown. Drake Maye gave you a passing touchdown. This is sort of what he is. He's going to make mistakes. The team is not good at all, but Drake Maye is going to put up fantasy points. I used him last week in a pretty high-stakes FFPC league, and I got the win because he gave me 20-plus points, and the rest of my team did very well. If you have a better quarterback option, of course, go with it. But Drake Maye can be successful in Week 16 and 17 despite difficult matchups. And people are going to say that Buffalo Bills game. That Bills game could go horribly wrong for New England, but garbage time. Buffalo gets these massive leads, and Drake Maye is going to run around, get rushing yardage. He's going to take shots downfield, and he's going to put up some fantasy points. So for me, Drake Maye is going to be somewhere inside the top 15 quarterbacks every single week moving forward. And next year, it could be wheels up when they improve that offensive line and that offensive line and the receiving game. So they get him a Ted McMillan, and they go out and sign a free agent offensive lineman. Then we're talking about wheels up, and Drake Maye is going to be a QB1 next year with fewer interceptions and more production. Cooper Rush, available to you in 92% of leagues. Cooper Rush had his best game as a pro. 3 touchdown passes against Carolina. Dallas won easily. And now Cooper Rush has a favorable matchup against Tampa Bay this week. If you have an injured quarterback and you're searching for a floor play quarterback who's going to have some yards and potentially some touchdowns, Cooper Rush against Tampa Bay, it could happen again. It's really difficult to start a guy like this, but there's a bunch of injuries this week that we want to keep an eye on. Bryce Young, available to you in 93% of leagues. really ugly game for Bryce Young. This is a big setback game for him in terms of, is he the man in terms of going into 2025 at quarterback in Carolina? Had 2 touchdowns, though. So real life football was worse than the fantasy production because he did have 2 touchdowns. Passed for 1, ran for 1, but 4 turnovers is 4 turnovers. I think Carolina is going to really need to take a look at what Bryce Young does for the next 3 games. Superflex, he's still on the radar. Now let's talk about this one. Dorian Thompson-Robinson. There's a chance that he's the starter this week for Cleveland against Cincinnati. So DTR will rush for yardage if he's the quarterback. There'll be design runs, and this is also a defense he's going up against in Cincinnati, who had a good statistical game fantasy-wise against Tennessee, but they can give up quarterback points. So DTR would be a super flex starter if he's named the starter this week by Kevin Stefanski. I don't know if this is going to happen. I hope it's Jameis Winston because I have a great deal of exposure, like hopefully you do, to Jerry Jeudy. DTR would make all the pass catchers in Cleveland lose value, but for him personally, he would be potentially an impactful start in Superflex. So if you want to sort of get ahead of things, add DTR for cheap in your Superflex leagues, and then if he's the starter, great. You have a guy you can consider streaming as your QB2. If it's Jameis again, then go ahead and cut DTR. But this is an interesting player. Maybe they want to get a look at what the young quarterback can do. Carson Wentz. This is a super flex only consideration, especially for Patrick Mahomes managers. Mahomes has an ankle injury. I don't know how serious this thing is, but he could miss a game. If he misses a game, Carson Wentz at home against Houston is not the worst time to throw a dart with your backup quarterback. I wouldn't like it, but again, it's hard to add quarterbacks this time of year. Mac Jones. Speaking of like really ugly names to talk about, Mac Jones had 294 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 29 rushing yards. Brian Thomas is an ascending star. Maybe at one point he'll be a superstar. Brian Thomas might be a 1-2 turn pick in redraft next year. That's sort of his trajectory right now heading into year 2. The hype for Brian Thomas this offseason is warranted, and it's going to be out of control. So Mac Jones, just tunnel vision, get the ball to Brian Thomas, get the ball to Brian Thomas. Maybe you pass for 2 more touchdowns again this week against Vegas. Talking about the running back spot, the best running back to add this week is Kendre Miller. And Kendre Miller is a guy we talked about for the last few weeks as a stash. Hopefully you stashed him. I wish I had more and listened to myself on this one because we talked about Kendre Miller's contingent upside if Alvin Kamara got hurt. Alvin Kamara left Sunday's game with an ankle injury. His status for week 16 is up in the air. Could be Miller time in New Orleans. And this is a player that I think could thrive in a 2-way role. We saw him score the touchdown against the Giants, and we saw him have 9 carries for 46 yards this past week. And New Orleans almost came back against Washington. Like, they fought really hard against a decent Commanders team that's going to be in the playoffs, and Miller played well. So Miller would be, I think, a top 18 start this week if Kamara was out, if I was ranking them, and he has some pass catching abilities. So Kendre Miller, if you need a running back, go and grab him. And here's an important one. If anyone in your league needs a running back or a flex, go grab him. So this should be like universal. I have Kendre with 2 wide receivers in my top 10 overall, but Kendre is the one you need to prioritize playing defense on. Don't let somebody in your league add Kendre Miller. You've seen the sort of value a guy like Ray Davis, Charbonnet, all these sort of contingent upside running backs when they get this opportunity to play, the scoring they put up. Even Amir Abdullah had a 15-pointer when he had the backfield to himself. So don't let your league mates get Kendre Miller. Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson's on the flex radar moving forward. This player has carved out a valuable and ascending role in this Buffalo backfield as a pass-catching specialist. Even though James Cook is balling, Ty Johnson limits his ceiling because Ty Johnson's getting these catches. Ty Johnson had a touchdown in week 14, and he had 123 total yards on Sunday against Detroit. So that was a shootout win, and Ty Johnson was a big part of it. So this offense is on fire, and Ty Johnson is one that we can throw a dart at if we really need a flex play and hope that he kind of stays hot. He makes my top 10. Kimani Vidal. Kimani Vidal is the only handcuff that I'm going to talk about that could take over the backfield without an injury. He was targeted in the passing game this past week. The game got out of control. Gus Edwards again leads the backfield. But if I'm looking at my team and I'm Harbaugh and I'm Greg Roman, my team needs to change it up. We just lost 40-17 to Tampa Bay. Maybe we see increased opportunities for Vidal this week, and then he's a guy that you consider putting in the flex in week 17. That could be a changing of the guard at running back in LA very soon. This team needs an offensive spark in a bad way. Justice Hill, available to you in 83% of leagues. He's sort of on the flex radar this week in a difficult matchup against the Steelers. Steelers are difficult to run on. You could see Justice Hill catch a couple passes. This past week, he had 5 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. So it's a desperation start, but he's still there. Isaiah Davis. Davis is available to you in 83% of leagues. And this is interesting because Braylon Allen is now dealing with a back injury. Breece Hall scored a touchdown this past week, but he's been dealing with injuries. So you could potentially have Isaiah Davis having the backfield to himself in week 17. That would be an interesting one. Dameon Pierce, available to you in 98% of leagues. The Houston says they're optimistic about Joe Mixon's ankle, but it's still an ankle. So Dameon Pierce could end up getting a spot start, maybe week 17. This is one to keep an eye on. Handcuff running backs: Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Ray Davis, Cam Akers, Kenneth Gainwell, Khalil Herbert. These guys are sort of all roster your own handcuff running back, or add one of these players as a lottery ticket in week 17. Like, these guys are not going in your lineup, but they would go in your lineup if the guy ahead of them got hurt. Blake Corum is the one that I would value the most, and I would kind of rank them: Corum, Benson, Ray Davis, Cam Akers, Kenneth Gainwell, Khalil Herbert. That's how I would rank them. And maybe you want to put Gainwell a little higher because of the quality of the offense. Wide receivers. I have 2 that I'm really excited about. First is Rashad Bateman, available to you in 75% of leagues. Top 3 overall addition for me this week. Lamar Jackson is red hot. Bateman's a major part of it. Led Baltimore with 80 receiving yards, added 2 touchdown catches. I'd like to see more targets than 5, but this is a high-flying offense. Rashad Bateman is an ad. You can throw him in the flex this week, even against Pittsburgh. Jalen McMillan, available to you in 91% of leagues. McMillan is balling. At one point, we had him as the number 1 ad on this show, and in my waiver wire article earlier in the year when Chris Godwin went down, that was one where we weren't wrong. We were just early. And McMillan's starting to show why we were hot about adding him that week. He's had 3 touchdowns over his last 2. Played well. He had 5 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown this past week against LA. Did it while Mike Evans was balling. So this was a huge one. Jalen Coker, available to you in 98% of leagues. Xavier Legette is now banged up. Coker had finished with 4 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown. It's going to be Coker on the field with Adam Thielen as the wide receivers in Carolina. He's an interesting one because of his big play potential. Had an 83-yard touchdown this last week. Malik Washington, available to you in 100% of leagues. Rookie wide receiver in Miami, had 52 receiving yards against Houston, and he has a chance to build some momentum heading into 2025. Jalen Waddle dealing with a knee injury. Washington would be on the field the entire time almost if Waddle misses. Remember, Odell Beckham no longer with Miami. So this is a Malik Washington next to Tyreek Hill and Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane. He would get a few targets. Ray McLeod did nothing last night, but he was targeted 23 times in the 3 games prior. Calvin Austin could be a spot start against Baltimore. He had 5 catches for 65 yards in Sunday's loss to Philly, but Baltimore's secondary can give up some big plays. If George Pickens misses, Calvin Austin's on the desperation radar. A player for you to stash. Hollywood Brown should be back this week. We'll see how ramped up he is. He's available to you in 74% of leagues. This is one, just stash him, see what happens. But if Hollywood Brown debuts with like 8 targets, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know this time of year. Teams want to take a look at what they have heading into the playoffs. If Hollywood Brown is fully healthy and ready to rock, in this Kansas City wide receiver room, he could command targets. Tim Patrick is on a heater for Detroit, available in 97% of leagues. Sort of like what we talked about with Bateman. Patrick gives you access to a high-end offense, and he's available in a lot of leagues. He's got 3 touchdowns in back-to-back games. Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange leads the tight end room here. 75% of leagues he's available, and Brenton Strange is is a very interesting player because Brenton Strange was a second-round pick in the 2023 NFL draft out of Penn State. And Brenton Strange didn't just like come on here. Like he filled in for Evan Ingram, so he's got experience in this offense. And this past week, he had 11 catches on 12 targets. Incredible numbers for a tight end. And this is a player where I think he could be a rest of the season low-end tight end 1 based on volume. And this, again, a second-round talent. I'm considering Brenton Strange to be a top 5 ad this week. Stone Smart, available in 94% of leagues. Stone Smart is a really fun player. He had 5 catches for 50 yards on 6 targets. He also drew a big pass interference penalty. This is a super athletic tight end for the Chargers. The Chargers need weapons. We talked about their struggles at running back. So Stone Smart is like an every down athletic tight end in LA who just came off of a 5-catch, 6-target game. He's going to have similar target volume in week 16 and week 17. Chigoziem Okonkwo back on our radars. Let's remember 2 seasons ago how red hot Chigoziem Okonkwo was. This was a guy that excelled as a rookie, had a forgetful sophomore year, and now is starting to play well at the end of year 3. So this is a player that had 10 targets combined in weeks 13 and 14, and then he had 10 targets this past game in week 15. He had 8 catches for 59 yards. He's on the radar. Noah Gray, available in 79% of leagues. He's had at least 4 catches or a touchdown in 5 straight games. Had a touchdown this past week. Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson available to you in 87% of leagues. Johnson had a complete dud in week 15, but had 12 targets in his previous 2 games. This is a player that we don't really want to start, but it's a desperation play. Foster Moreau led the New Orleans tight end production this past week, but if it was still like a desperation tight end premium type league, I'd still prefer Johnson, but definitely lost a lot of luster after this kind of dud against Washington and Moreau mixing in so much. So I really think that Strange and Stone Smart and Okonkwo are head and shoulders the best tight end ads this week, despite Noah Gray playing well. I like those other guys' sort of trajectories over the next 2 weeks. Here's my overall top 10 additions. And again, all of these players are available to you in 70% of leagues. This is a pretty fun list for week 16 because you have a plug-and-play running back. Kendre Miller is our number 1 ad. If Alvin Kamara is out, he's a plug-and-play running back. Jalen McMillan at number 2, wide receiver Tampa Bay. Rashad Bateman at number 3, wide receiver Baltimore. Brenton Strange at tight end for Jacksonville. Jalen Coker, wide receiver Carolina. Drake Maye, quarterback New England. Ty Johnson, running back Buffalo. Kimani Vidal, running back LA. Chigoziem Okonkwo at 9, tight end Tennessee. Malik Washington at 10. Once again, number 1, Kendre Miller. Number 2, Jalen McMillan. Number 3, Rashad Bateman. Number 4, Brenton Strange. Number 5, Jalen Coker. Number 6, Drake Maye. Number 7, Ty Johnson. Number 8, Kimani Vidal. Number 9, Chigoziem Okonkwo. Number 10, Malik Washington. I'm Theo Gremminger. Make sure you're sticking with us here at Player Profiler all throughout your fantasy playoffs. Check out the press coverage I'm dropping with Sigmund Bloom this week. You'll also find me on Bold Predictions with Matt Kelly. And I'm dropping a Dynasty Life, taking a look at the 2025 incoming rookie class with Brett Whitefield of Fantasy Points. That should be a lot of fun a little bit later this week. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button and make sure you subscribe. And if you are listening on the podcast, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. It helps us out a lot, and it costs you nothing. We will see you soon, and let's crush it. You worked all season long for this. Time to go get that money. Time to go get that championship. We'll see you back here next week.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.